So live.
Good evening. My name is Dylan Gohill with the Stanford Daily.
I'm Seamus Allen.
And I'm Mark Allen Coop.
Tonight we welcome you to the ASSU Undergraduate Senate debate. We will be talking to the candidates about the most pressing and salient issues affecting the university and its student body. The design of the debate will involve 3 question categories. Each candidate will receive 90 seconds to respond to each question and will be alerted when 15 seconds remain. The candidates will respond in random order for each question. The candidates were informed of the debate categories before the debate, however, they were not shown the specific questions. Each candidate will first have 30 seconds for an opening statement. We will go in the order you are sitting. David, let's start with you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is David Sengthay. I'm a second-year undergraduate at Stanford University, majoring in urban studies and hopefully co-terming in public policy. We'll see next year. I'm currently working at the Fly Center as the new student program coordinator, involved in Cambodian Student Association as the historian and webmaster, and a proud Stanford student. My 4 campaign pillars are community building, Fly advocacy, political advocacy, and quality of life. And I hope to convince you tonight that I deserve your vote.
Ivy, you next.
Hi everyone, I'm Ivy Chen, she, her pronouns. I'm currently a sophomore here at Stanford, majoring in political science and trying to co-term in sociology on the pre-law track. I'm currently an undergraduate senator, and I am rerunning to continue the work that we've done this year. So much progress has been made over the past year as a senator, and I hope to continue the work that we've been doing. And I'm more than happy to get into the initiatives that we've been doing this year and how we can build upon everything that we've been doing this next year.
And Gordon.
Hi everyone, I'm Gordon, pronouns he, him. I'm double majoring in economics and political science. I'm seeking re-election to the undergraduate senate. It has been a fantastic year and I hope to continue to do great work around accessibility, affordability, and just ensuring the continuance of our initiatives.
Wonderful. We'll begin with mental health. The COVID-19 pandemic and the years after the initial lockdown revealed to the Stanford community how the many issues of mental health resources on campus. How do you plan to use your position in ASSU to promote mental wellness across the university? And what do you think needs to change about the current support system? We will begin with Ivy.
I think mental health is very important. It is such an important issue on campus, and as someone who has been struggling with mental health this year, it is a lot, in that Stanford doesn't have a lot of resources that offer support for students who are going through mental health. And mental health is not a visible thing as like a physical injury. Like mental health is something that's mental and you can't see that. And through that, for next year, what I want to do is focus more on strengthening CAPS as a resource. This was my first year going to CAPS. It has been a very interesting ride, and I think there's a lot more that we can do to strengthen CAPS and make sure that there's a good dialogue around it so that people feel comfortable coming to CAPS and that there is positive relationship established between like the therapist and the student who's going. Just really making sure that we promote a healthy dialogue around mental health is very important on campus, and doing that through initiatives like making sure that we are offering better staff support and better initiatives through like CAPS and also just VADEN is so important. But also just like VSHAC, something that our current deputy chair Joy has been sort of spearheading, and I think that's something that we need to strengthen and do better next year.
All right, Gordon, you're up next.
I would say, first, mental health is, insanely important, and also with the VSAC committee, right? What I want to do is, there's like a lot of misinformation about, the number of therapists you can actually see through CAPS without having to pay, as if you want to seek like short-term care. So I think first is, countering misinformation around like existing mental health resources and how to access it, right? Then once we get into that, and then like expanding like better health resources or long-term care resources for therapy and such. And one last thing I will say on this topic is that leveraging, faculty in these conversations, right? With students experience like, decline in their mental health, it could be due to, excessive workload or not feeling supported by their teaching staff, etc. So like working with professors, make sure like lectures are recorded, for instance, or making sure that, they're being more lenient when it comes to extensions. Just working to see like what students are exactly struggling with that's contributing to their decline in their mental health, I would just say, so yeah.
Yeah, just hearkening both of these points, I think strengthening CAPS is one strong point there. A lot of folks don't even understand what resources are available to them on campus. And with that in mind, I think we ought to leverage our ASSU undergrads mailing list, our Instagram accounts, whatnot, to really promote what resources we have for our students. Neighborhood events promoting, petting a llama, these sort of things where people can go to together, community building events, can also strengthen one's mental health on campus, as one's mental health can be dictated by the strength of their community on campus. I found that in my past 2 years at Stanford, I've leaned on support from not only professional staff, well-being coaches, my own personal therapist, my friends and my networks. And I think Stanford students are now yearning, especially after the pandemic, they're yearning for a sense of connection. And these senses of connections can be built through events that they can attend, going to socials and whatnot. Like, mental health is a very multifaceted issue that often requires professional help, but we ought to be able to lean on each other during these tough times, especially in the current state of the world as we know it.
Thank you so much, guys. We're going to be moving into our next topic, which is safety and activism. So we'll be starting with Gordon. So Gordon, what is the role of student activism on campus? How do you plan to interact with student demonstrators and activism, if elected, and in your case, re-elected, as an ASSU senator?
Yeah, so first, student activism is extremely important. Stanford has such a rich history of student activism, and I think it's the role of the university to not only support those student activists in terms of safety, but also making sure they have the space to be able to practice their student activism, right? But us, this university is, you said we prioritize free speech and liberal education. Part of liberal education and free speech is being able to voice your concerns on things, and also just raise awareness around other things. To your second question, if I were to be re-elected, how would I interact with student activists, right? I would say first, getting to know who are the points of contact, right? And see what can we do as a body to support them, whether that's, giving them resources for, water bottles, food, or whatever, or also just seeing what can we do in terms of resolutions to support their causes. As well as helping to ensure they are getting awareness, and also that it's, when it comes to interaction with faculty, that we support them on those lines, because they shouldn't be doing this alone. If they have a student body backing them when they go against administration, I feel that would best support their interests in terms of safety, but also just raising their activism awareness. So
thank you so much, Gordon. David, we'll move on to you.
Yeah, I want to harken that point on points of contention between administration and students. I am elected by the student body. My interest lies within the undergraduate student population of Stanford University. And in that role, I plan to use my position, capacity, and leadership to bring up concerns from the student body directly towards the administration. Even if the administration does not agree, I'm representing the student body first and foremost. Right? I come from a student activist background. I've been involved in student engagement with activism since high school. And I think that there will be points of contention where administration level officials may not agree with what we're saying, what we're doing. But as a student on this campus, and hopefully your next senator, I want to represent the student body and only the student body's interests that have elected me, right? And even if that goes against administration's wishes, I'm willing to represent that to them and serve as a sort of this mediator, right? We have student activists on this side and administration on this side. The role of the senator, in my opinion, right, is to bring upon these concerns, issues, and the thoughts of the student body to the administration. Because sometimes the point of contention is there is a miscommunication or a break in communication between these two parties. As a senator, I'm here to mediate these discussions and ensure that the best path moving forward is collaboration between these two bodies for a better Stanford, especially for the student body.
Definitely, I just want to echo those points. So true. But student activism has fueled so much campus history for as long as Stanford has existed, I believe since the 1800s. And student activism, just activism in general, has fueled world movements, and has really gotten us to where we are today. Without activism, there wouldn't be where we are today. And so activism is so important. And I think just us running for Senate position, us advocating for all of this is really just representing the students right here. Having student activism is such a crucial part of campus. President Soller, who used to serve here, but also just a bunch of faculty members, professors, they used to be student activists. And it would not have been possible, the things that we have achieved today, without these people advocating for what they believe in on campus. So Stanford, like I want to echo Gordon, does have a really rich history of student activism, and I think it's really important that we keep this up. But in terms of like going against faculty, I think this is a conversation that everyone has really just talked about or like asked about in terms of like, how can you get this done? How can you advocate on behalf of the students? And that's really going up to the faculty and standing firm on your two legs on what you believe about and like what you want to fight against. And so I'm telling you that I am not afraid to go up against faculty. Like this year, we've been advocating for a green library for as long as it has took the entire school year. And it's gotten done because we have tirelessly gone against faculty, gone against librarian administratives, gone against the provost, just to get work done. So I am not afraid to go up against faculty when it comes to getting student things done, because I'm here to listen to you and your voice.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question. With many people, both on and off Stanford's campus, expressing discontent with ongoing polarization occurring on college campuses, what role does the ASSU play in ensuring free speech, academic freedom, and political dialogue? Ivy, we'll start with you.
Definitely. And this is such a good question because I feel like this year Stanford has been going through a lot, from affirmative action to free speech issues. And free speech is something that is guaranteed in our First Amendment rights, and that is something that we should have. And in terms of addressing free speech on campus, on the current Senate, we've been writing and passed a resolution on free speech. We've been in conversation with faculty members on free speech. Just yesterday, we had a Senate meeting, and there was a faculty member that came in, and we talked about free speech. It's an ongoing conversation that is not going to stop. It's never going to stop. It will continue for as long as I'm here, and for as long as we're here to serve the student body. But in terms of free speech and the current, I just want to address the current ongoing sort of genocide that's been going on, and student protests and everything. Like, on the Senate, we've been advocating for resolutions being passed. We've been advocating for resolutions such as BDS, and that's something that we're working on, and we have advocated because we believe that it's so important to address free speech, but also to make sure that we prioritize student well-being and student safety. And Stanford recently achieved the longest sit-in in like history, but it honestly tremendously concerns me that students are not being protected, student speech is not being protected, and that their rights are being violated. And which is why we've been tirelessly working on, resolutions, talking to students, talking to faculty, and how we can improve free speech on campus, how we can protect students and their well-being and their lives and their voices on campus. And so that's an ongoing issue, and it's not going to close anytime soon.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, thank you, Ivy, for bringing that up. I appreciate what the Senate has been doing to protect free speech, and I just want to bring in some contextual. If you've been watching the news, you've seen what's happening at Columbia University, where police were bringing in, where the university president ordered the NYPD to enter campus, right, during a peaceful protest on what was sanctioned as actual, well, it was basically their white plaza, right, a place designated for discussion, designated for free speech, right. I don't want to see that happening at Stanford University, right? And the fear many students have with free speech. I remember back in November, it was late at the Fly Center, I was talking to two freshmen about what was happening in Palestine, and they told me they were afraid to speak up because of the doxing, of the harassment, of the fear of their scholarship being taken away, of the fear, because these are first-generation low-income students. They are here, and it's often a very fraught awareness that they are here, and it can be taken very easily away from them, right? They don't have the cushioning to not be attending college, right? And so I think that this fear within our student body, right, especially, freshmen and the first-generation low-income students, right, we have to protect them with free speech policies, but also we have to make sure and pressure our administration to have our backs too. What happened at Columbia University this past week was a failure of the university's administration to protect their students. I mean, calling the NYPD on a peaceful protest in riot and SWAT gear is ridiculous. And I'm telling you, as a senator, right, even as a student activist, I would definitely be ashamed of this university if they would do the same actions at Columbia University. I mean, looking at USC currently, so sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, first I would say, when it comes to free speech, the resolution that we did, I was one of the few senators who, actively supported that. And I say we couldn't have done more as a as a body in terms of really emphasizing like the importance to support like the sit-in, the sit-in tent for like Palestine, and also just ensuring that we heavily push the administration to value free speech. Um, but something I did personally was actually engage with them. So actually like go out into White Plaza and actively like talk to the people there and take part in doing my job and like sitting down and just listening to like what can I do to support is helpful too. I think oftentimes when it comes to elected officials, people might forget that you are working on the behalf of people, right? You should not be afraid to like go into the community and see what you can do to best support them from the grounds up, and also not be afraid to like do what you feel is the most controversial thing to do. Yes, some people are probably worried about elections, securing votes, or maintaining connections with faculty. But at the end of the day, you are an elected person who is here to serve students, not administration. So I think keeping that at the forefront of your mind is important. And I think you mentioned academic freedom, right? I would say what comes to mind with that is just like the importance of like securing students' privacy, right? I think there's more things that the administration can do, like for the doxing things, but also supporting faculty who want to support students. I mean, at a faculty senate meeting, there was a professor who kept raising up questions about BDS and etc., and making sure that we support the faculty who wants to support students too, because at the end of the day, their jobs are probably online or tenureship or whatever. And lastly, you mentioned like open dialogue or something. I think like maybe as like a governing body, hosting sessions where we like bring the community together to like learn about these things. I mean, there's like a lot of learning things at Kairos about, the genocide that's happening. But I mean, that doesn't stop us from hosting our own open dialogue sessions and ensuring like respect and security there as well. So.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
We'll now move on to funding and administration, which is a large part of the work that the ASSU does, as I'm sure you all know. I'd like to ask about club funding. Are each of you happy with the club funding policies from last year, and how would you change them for this year if you could? We'll start with Gordon.
Yeah, so I serve as the Deputy Appropriations Chair. I would have to say I'm very proud of not only the Appropriations Chair, but also this Appropriations Committee. When it comes to club funding, I will admit, like when I was first running for Senate, right, my first year, I was like, oh, we need more club, like we need more to do things for club funding. But like if you actually understand the process on the back end, it's just that we are operating a very limited budget, right? And we also don't want to, raise up the activities fee too much, because that's how we get the revenues to fund VSOs, right? So it's like finding the balance between not overspending, right, but also getting clubs at least like adequate amounts of funding. And I would say what's the important thing that I learned is the importance of communication, right? And trying to do conflict resolution. So actively talk to these people during your office hours or reaching out to them. The importance of reaching out to them first is, I think, what's going to best help you with leveraging them to compromise. But also just understanding that we are operating with a limited budget. So I would just say, transparency, communication, and just ultimately willing to be cooperative on both ends.
All right, David?
Yeah, I mean, this year I've had no qualms of VSO funding for our university-sponsored clubs, right? But I do think one of my concerns, at least, being an active member of the Cambodian Student Association, not directly a financial officer, but I've worked with many financial officers during my time here at Stanford. I think a lot of some of the concerns they had was that it's kind of hard to access and use grant ed, and it's the utilization of the site, like the UI of it, is a bit dated, right? And I do think that like if we could make the process a bit easier for our VSO officers, especially our FOs, they wouldn't have to be stressing out at the beginning of April applying for major grants and whatnot, right, for the next upcoming academic year. So I do think that there's some work to be done on the functionality of applying for funding and clarifying those sort of policies, right? And I do think it would be useful, is the big ask, but a sort of mandatory retreat for all VSO officers in the beginning of the year, right? Undertaking these leadership roles can be a very daunting position, and sometimes we often enter them without really understanding what it really entails. And that's the problem and then you get into the academic year and you're already a stressed out student trying to manage all these things. It's a little harder to understand these new processes on grant ed and whatnot, applying for funding. So I do think there is some work to be done with onboarding and utilization of these services provided by the ASSU.
I just want to say, like, first and foremost, I'm honestly very, very proud of the appropriations committee, especially our appropriations chair. Just want to give a shout out to Ishan Sang. He is doing a fantastic, amazing job with all of these grants, pouring in so much energy and time into everything. But also just, the appropriations committee, which I'm also on as well. We meet weekly. We also host weekly office hours, talking to students, talking to students and financial officers, and making sure that they are well understood in terms of like the funding process, but if they have questions with like their grants, quick standard or annual grants that they ask us during office hours. And so we're always there for students. During especially our weekly office hours, we set aside time to meet with them and talk to them and understand what they're going through, and if they have any issues or problems, that we're like talking to them about that and sorting it through, because club funding is so important. Because Stanford is operated by a bunch of different clubs here. We have so many different amazing cool clubs, from like sports clubs to musical clubs to like ethnicity clubs. There's just so many great clubs here on campus, and we fund them, and we try our best to fund them given our constrained budget. And obviously, like Gordon said, if we do raise, the funding, it would also drastically increase the student fees, which would definitely present a burden to a lot of students. In that they have to pay more in terms of like student fees. And so we are trying to provide as much money as we can given the constrained sort of club funding that we have for money. And so like I've said, in terms of like grant ed, I think that's a really important issue. Like I said, I am really proud of the appropriations committee, but there's always work that we have to do. There's always work, and it's never going to be finished, but there's always things that we can do to improve it. So yeah.
So much, Sean. We'll be now moving into the candidate-specific questions about all your platforms. So Gordon, we'll be starting with you. You are running for re-election as an undergraduate senator, and your platform really emphasizes your past accomplishments during your time in ASSU this past year.
Okay.
So what do you aim to do differently now that you have experience under your belt?
Yeah, I would say cultivating faculty relationships early on. If you can, no one wants you just come to them just to use them, right? So like actually get to know them as a person, and first just learning more about them. I think it's really important because at the end of the day, they are human. But I would also say the importance of starting early on is that things take time. Like for the Green Initiative, we started at October, November, and we didn't start to see it fruition for over so long, right? But if we were to start it earlier, like with our 5 Short thing or with our RD&E initiative, right, I feel that we might have seen more of progress being made. It just because with someone's bureaucracy, it just, you should want to start early, but also just knowing that you have to first also understand why things are the way they are, right? So understanding why haven't we seen now already all the other come back? Well, renovations are still happening, right? And inflationary costs, et cetera, et cetera. Or for other things, you want to understand why before you just go in and blame them for not having it. And I think by first giving them that that space to voice why something is not being made to the way you want to, and then working to find a resolve there is the best way to address it from a humane perspective.
Thank you, Gordon. All right.
Thank you.
Our next question is for David. You've been pretty public in your support for the boycott, divestment, and sanctions resolution. Assuming that passes in the ASSU, you still can't modify the university's endowment policies directly. What would your next steps be on this issue?
Obviously celebrate that is what passing that resolution, it affirms the support of the student body, right, for the Palestinian people, right, in Gaza right now. But obviously, like you said, right, these sort of questions that would next steps, it would obviously going on to a higher level, right? How can we actually divest the university's funding from Israel? And that would obviously take conversations with faculty, with folks in the administration, right? And I think Gordon put it best, is building up those relationships, right? In relationship building, right, we have to meet these folks halfway, and we have to educate them on our position, right? Why do we believe these things? And how do we reach out to them, right? And I think one of the greatest barriers we're facing right now is that there's this sort of breaking communication between the student body and administration. And that's why we're seeing this sort of two-pronged thought, right? On the administration saying one thing, but the student body once overwhelmingly supports BDS, right? So how do we reach out to the administration and tell them that the student body appreciates them for supporting BDS? And I think through that, it's just you leveraging my position as a senator, right? Being duly elected by the undergraduate population, leveraging that, getting into these meetings, speaking on behalf, even inviting some of these student activists to communicate and talk and vouch for their position in order to communicate this point to the administration. I'm not going to promise anything because we cannot, obviously, I cannot control what the university administration can or cannot do, but I will always vouch for them in these meetings and in these positions where they can get into the room and at least communicate their points directly to the person making decisions.
All right, Ivy. Last year, you served on the neighborhood task force, which helped reform the neighborhood system. Now that changes have been implemented, how do you think the system should continue to evolve going forward, and what role do you see for ASSU in that evolution?
Yeah, great question. Thank you so much for asking. It was a privilege serving on the neighborhood task force this past year, and I know that housing assignments have like sort of been just like released, like you had to apply for housing and everything. So it's really just a pilot year. We're not really sure how students will take it, but upon passing what we did as a task force, you know, obviously we were on Viz, and like I just saw a bunch of like good support from students, people being like, finally something has been done here, something has been changed, the neighborhood system has long overdue been the worst thing ever, and like this has been the greatest thing ever in terms of like housing. And so right off the bat we got pretty receptive, great, welcoming responses from the student body, but because we're still piloting it and making sure that like this is what the students actually want and what the students actually need, we're gonna see how it is this year. But also it's going to be not just this year, but it's going to go into effect for quite a bit of time. But as someone who was on a neighborhood task force, I want to engage the ASSU more in the neighborhood sort of involvement. So whether that's through hosting more neighborhood events, or whether that's through fostering more community, because one of the biggest issues that the students did not really like about the neighborhood system was that it did not have or foster good community amongst people. And so what we as senators can do is making sure that we do foster good community with people. So that's through hosting neighborhood events, making sure that people are satisfied with the neighborhood system, and making sure that like people are just aware of like how to apply for housing and everything. And I think that's something that we're seeing this year, and I'm excited to hear from feedback from students in terms of like how housing is upon this application cycle.
Now we'll return to a few closing questions to round out the debate. Leaving practical considerations behind for the moment and getting into the more philosophical, what do you think Stanford is at its best? And what could it become someday, even if it isn't there yet? Ivy, will begin with you.
That is a great question, because I feel like Stanford needs to be at its best. Like, it absolutely needs to. But what I envision as Stanford being at its best is when faculty is actually listening to the voices of the student body, when the faculty is there for the students. And how we can accomplish that is making sure that we are there for the students, and that we are hearing the voices of the students and hearing them and what they have to say, and representing them at their best of the ability that we can. And so because of that, I want to make sure that I can represent students in any capacity, any way, and any shape and form that I can for these students, to make sure that as a senator, this faculty members are listening to our voices, listening to our concerns, listening to our needs. And so a perfect Stanford will be in which we are advocating upon the students and making sure that faculty is listening to the students. And I guess to begin that, it starts with us. It starts with us talking to faculty members. It starts with us making sure that we accomplish what we want in terms of our initiatives, and making sure that we are representing the students so that we can foster a great relationship between the faculty members, but also between the students. And I think that would be the perfect Stanford, and that's something that I'm fighting for next year.
Gordon, we'll have you next.
Yeah, I would say the perfect Stanford to me would be Stanford not being afraid to be a pioneer in spaces amongst its peer institutions. And what I mean by that is that where we feel where Stanford is lacking, well, they would make sense to say, well, what are our peer institutions doing, such as like Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, etc. And like on the topic of like RA stipends, our peer institutions, they probably have the same policy, but we shouldn't be afraid to be the first in the top 5 to offer them much more, right? When it comes to the BDS initiative, right? We shouldn't be afraid among our peer institutions to do more to make sure we actively divest from things that support like the genocide as such from our endowment. And I would just say, the way we can implement that or encourage that with administration, it's by telling Stanford has done a lot of things that peer institutions aren't doing or haven't even haven't done before we did. So this showing like the importance of being a pioneer and a leader, right? They're trying to make us into global leaders and global scholars, right? But if you're always constantly comparing yourself and not really trying to be ambitious because your peers aren't doing so, what does that make yourself look like on the stage? So I would say really emphasize the importance of being a leader in spaces where Stanford is lacking in.
Yeah, so great points, you two. But for me, I want to focus more on like students, right? I think my experience here at Stanford, like why am I here at Stanford, is to elevate my family out of poverty. My mom's worked minimum wage jobs her entire life. Me attending Stanford is an ability for me to be the first one in the family to buy a house, to have a college degree, to make at least 6 figures, right? And hopefully send my children off to college and actually pay for their tuitions, right? And so I think Stanford at its best is an institution that elevates students and promotes social mobility, right? Education, right, is the ticket to so much wealth, right? A wealth of knowledge, but also like wealth in this world, right? Like, and also the ability for us to elevate so many of our peers to like higher places where they can achieve what they want to do. I think Stanford's best ability is to elevate so many students and give them the opportunity to become more than what they could have imagined, right? When I applied to Stanford, I never imagined I'd be here, right? I never imagined I'd be running for undergraduate senate at Stanford, too, 2 years after being here, right? And I think this sort of question of what is Stanford at its best, is when Stanford's directly serving a student's ability to become something more than they could have imagined, right? I'm from Stockton, California. I'm from the hood, and it's hard, right? Like, I mean, like, not many of my peers make it to places like Stanford, right? I've had peers die of gang violence before the age of 20, right? And my ability to be here is my ability to leverage this institution's privilege and resources for my community. And I think just elevating so many people through Stanford is Stanford at its best.
Thank you all. So now you each have 2 minutes to make a closing statement. Why are you the best candidate to be an undergraduate senator? We'll start with Gordon.
I'm the best candidate to be an undergraduate senator. One, I have to drive. As you see, I have done a lot of activist efforts prior to Stanford. I led many movements around women's health, queer representation, things around DACA, sexual violence, etc. I'm not afraid to go against those in charge or in power. At the end of the day, my job is to serve you, and I will make sure to do that to the best of my ability. And also, I would add that I am here to also listen. I mean, there's been things that I may have actively supported or encouraged that I personally didn't really like see myself being affected by it. But at the end of the day, if you are a representative, your job is to do things that doesn't necessarily impact you anyway, right? So having someone like me on the Senate would mean that your initiatives and your voice will be amplified, but also there will be progress made. On the Senate, there's sometimes people may feel very discouraged by the work because it takes too long, or it may take more effort than they intended. I'm not going to sell you short. Like, I'm going to make sure I stay determined and, fierce and delivering what I promised.
That's a great question. I think I'm a great person for this role because, like Gordon said, I feel like I have the dog and like the motivation and like the dedication, like the work ethic to do like what I'm doing. And to also just achieve bigger and better things next year, right? I'm not afraid to work 24/7 on these initiatives, whether it means, skipping like my sociology reading or not doing my poli-sci work or like staying up late and like drafting things or like Fizz posts, like sending out updates. I'm not afraid to do all of that. And I will put aside time of like my other commitments and my other involvements, whether it be academic or like professional work, to make sure I get my Senate shit done. I'm not afraid to do that, and I will do that. And I will stand by my commitments, stand by what I promised to the student body to get those work done. Because at the end of the day, I'm here to serve the students and the student body. And even if it means putting aside time to do other things, I will do that. I will make sure that like my Senate stuff comes first, and that's my biggest priority. And again, like I've said, since last year when I ran for Senate the first time, I'm here to listen to the voice of the students. I'm here to listen to the students because I'm here to represent the students. And I've been committing to my goals since day one, and I'm not afraid to commit to bigger goals next year and to continue the goals that I've been doing since last year. So, conclusion, I just feel like I have the dog, and I will do what I can to make sure that we carry out great and better initiatives for next year.
I think the reason why I even ran for Senate is because people told me to, people believed in me, people had faith in me, right? But the only reason they did that is because I had built such a trust within my community. I'm very active in the first generation low income community ever since I started working there. I did an NSO for new students, Frosh, right? Coming in during this year's NSO, and ever since then I've just felt so much love in community. And that's when I felt Stanford at its best. I finally felt welcomed and accepted as an institution after doing some of this hard work for my campus, right? And my former boss at the Fly Center, her name was Simone, she said it best during the welcome dinner for the Fly students this year. She said, "This isn't hard work, it's heart work. Everything I do for Stanford has always been from the heart." And I think that one thing that sets me apart, right, from people here, right, is the fact that I do everything from the bottom of my heart. I'm not the type of person that hides how he's feeling, how I feel about something. I let that drive me into representing my community, right? I think it's very hard to separate my feelings and how I feel with how I'm going to lead for this campus, right? And I think I've just proven time and time and again my commitment to my community, and I'd like to extend my commitment from the Fly community to the greater Stanford community, right? I think that I've proven in my role that I'm here to show up for people, I'm here to listen, I'm here to be your biggest advocate, especially in scary rooms, the scary administration level officials. I want to be that person that you can go to and you can believe has your back, right? Sometimes it's hard when you're at Stanford and you feel like there's so many things happening. I feel like everybody's against me. I want to be that sort of person that's there for you and represent to you at least that I have your back. I'm going to be advocating for you. And at the end of the day, even if we don't get everything we want done, we at least put it on the table. I'm never going to promise and say X, Y, and Z will happen by the end of my term, but I promise to you X, Y, and Z, whatever your concerns are, will be brought up and addressed. Thank you.
All right. We will now take a brief recess while we get the next slate of candidates up here, get some water, put some new names on the board. Thank you all so much for attending, and we'll see you later.
Wait, is this a recording?
Yeah.
I wonder. I was going to be all enjoyed.
Let's move off camera.
We got that hot mic on.
That was fun.
I liked it.
You did amazing.
You guys did good.
That was literally like
I told you I was like,
3
yes.
minutes.
I know.
That's not bad.
That's not bad. I thought something.
I don't know how to do this.
Yes, I agree with you.
You take over. I don't know what I'm doing.
There we go.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I feel it.
Let's.
I can do that.
Okay, I'm just gonna grab
All right, everyone, we're live.
So holler up if anything happens, if any fights break out.
Okay.
Tell me to come down.
Oh no.
Got it.
Hey, people. Ooh, let's put this on Do Not Disturb.
Oh, you're so real to that.
The phones we got
Let's make
crazy.
sure we got everybody in the frame. Yep. We need to go this way. Wait, am I wrong?
No, you're good. Maybe we just need to move the chairs a little bit. Do we need to scoot? Which way can we scoot? This way? That way? This way?
Oh, wow, this is.
There we go. Perfect.
Yeah, that works.
Are we live? Oops.
Yes, you are. Alright. Welcome everybody. Same as last time, you will have 30 seconds to introduce yourself, and then we will move on to questions. Again, we've randomized the order in which candidates will answer each question. Let's begin with Lizbeth.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Lizbeth. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a junior majoring in political science and double minoring in human rights and art practice. My platform is primarily focused on introducing a BDS resolution in the Undergraduate Senate, making sure there's a lot more focus and advocacy for the Latinx community on campus, specifically focusing on Central American, South American, and undocumented students. And yeah, thank you for having me here.
Angelina?
Yeah, hi, thank you for having me here. My name is Angelina. I'm studying electrical engineering. I'm running Primarily, or I guess my reason for running was spurred by a real love for engineering, design, and arts communities on campus that I feel need additional support and representation in groups like the ASSU. I'm really passionate about hearing students' voices, talking to people in my communities, talking to friends and mentors and people I care about, and using that talking to reflect in like legislation and policy that I accomplished in the Senate. And yeah, thanks for having me. Excited.
Ethan?
Half a day, everyone. My name is Ethan Alfonso. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a first-year student, prospectively double majoring in comparative studies in race, ethnicity, and psychology. My platform runs on 4 pillars: political advocacy, fly advocacy, the student experience, as well as the 4th one is going to come to my head as we talk, but that all goes to show that I'm eager to get into dialogue and demonstrate my unwavering commitment to y'all, so I'm excited.
All right.
Hi everyone, my name is Mandla Msipa. If you know me, you might have seen me in a play I did a few months ago. It was lots of fun. Otherwise, I do admin weekend. I'm a row RA next year. It's really exciting. Most importantly, my platform is centered on housing transparency. It's focused on transparency overall, academic enrollment. It's really important to me that people feel like they're in dialogue with their administrators. And so personally, I'm running to make Stanford closer resemble the magical kingdom for which I hope that you applied to study at. And I think we can make that happen together.
All right. The COVID pandemic and the years after the initial lockdown revealed to the Stanford community the many issues with mental health resources on campus. Again, how do you plan to use your position in ASSU to promote mental wellness across the university? What do you think needs to change about the current mental health system? Mandla, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is the bridge. The bridge is an amazing thing, and people don't appreciate how unique it is to Stanford. There's no other program in the country that has this level of training for peer counselors, and the bridge has been under attack for a long time. I mean, like, the bridge, I don't know if anyone knows the history, has moved locations several times. Right now it's in Mungo, where previously it had its own house. So I think the first thing is give the bridge the capacity to grow. It's 100% important that the bridge is able to reach Stanford students. And I think the second thing is that campus-wide, we make sure that all of our student leaders are focused on spreading messages of mental health support, mental health awareness. I also think that we need to remember that mental health problems don't happen in isolation. You know, there are social determinants of mental health. It's really hard to have good mental health when you don't have a room to cry in, which is why I think it's really important that we convert as many one-room doubles into two-room doubles as possible. People deserve private sleeping spaces. You get better sleep, you get better rest. I think it's really important that there's less economic anxiety. It's really, really hard to focus in class when you don't know when your financial aid award is going to come, when you're going to get your stipend for your internship. I think there's a lot that Stanford can do to fix people's mental health. Treatment is really important, and I can't emphasize enough. We need to do better on treatment. But it's also important that we think about why people have such awful mental health at this place in the first place, because otherwise we're always just like, it's a leaky bucket. We're never going to fill it up if we don't focus on those reasons that people have awful mental health, which is why one of the first things I would do as a senator is a campus-wide solicitation of the reasons they feel that Stanford denigrates their mental health, either intentionally or unintentionally, academics-wise. Another dimension of mental health. I don't think those kinds of efforts are really important.
All right, Angelina?
This is a great question that really strikes a chord with me. I think from the ASSU's position and perspective, there is a lot that we can do for advocacy and information spreading. Again, bouncing off of what was just said, making sure that student leaders and other representatives across campus know about the resources and can communicate those to people that they are responsible for or like spend a lot of time with. But then from the power and the authority that the ASSU has, making sure the facilities on campus are well suited for accommodating student needs. This can come in a variety of formats, whether it's additional programming, additional events and activities that the ASSU can support that support mental health. And if that means different things for different students, hearing out the students, having some sort of way to collect information, the ASSU Senate already does that really well by having polls and surveys that really kind of try to put the finger on what students need and how their needs aren't being met on a day-to-day basis. And just generally, I feel that Stanford can feel like a pressure cooker. It can feel like everyone's doing all these things all at once, and you need to do everything that they're doing in order to keep up and keep pace. And anything that we can do to dismantle that and make people feel like they have a safe space rather, to practice their passions and their interests without feeling like they're behind on everything and like they have to, make themselves spread so thin in order to be a valid member of the community. That's what we should be aiming for as part of the Senate.
Right, Lizbeth?
Yeah, I think that mindfulness classes are a big barrier, unfortunately, given that they require some form of payment to enroll. And I think access to these classes should be made more available. I also think that there should be like mindfulness workshops, let's say weekly. For example, at the Fly Student Success Center, we have an amazing well-being coach. Her name is Sherilyn. And every once in a while, she hosts these mindfulness workshops, and I've heard nothing but good things from these workshops. I think it's also really important to like think about how she works. She moves away from the Western way of therapy, and I think it's also important to keep that in mind when we're thinking about the communities that we're serving and what kind of therapy we offer.
So I have a very unique perspective on this take because I was a member of SAP, led by the marvelous, the amazing Joy Malloy. Like, kudos to her. She led that beautifully. I'm so honored to like be under her leadership and for her allowing me the space to grow. And so at the end of winter quarter, that was rough. Let me go back. But during that time, we had our SAP presentations, and our thing, we were targeting mental health. And so me and 5 other brilliant minds were talking about how can we make mental health more accessible, so going towards this question. And so one of the main things we talked about is CAPS, of course. But the main thing about CAPS is it's meant to be short term. You're meant to go there to 4 to 6 sessions, and then from there you're supposedly healed. Well, in reality, that's not how that works. That's not how trauma works. That's not how healing works. And so we were really thinking about what are the next steps after CAPS, because we feel like CAPS, for what it is and what its purpose is strong enough. And so what's next is how do we move forward? And so a couple things we were talking about is outside services that really introduce long-term care. Because here at Stanford, we believe that this is not the best place to do that. Because if you are to go to a campus that's draining you, why would you go to a therapist, or like why would you seek services in that same place? So we believe that going to outside services within the area is the best way to combat mental health, and to come back from mental health and all that things. And so some other ways to get to these outside resources, we were talking about reimbursements. And so what that means would be like providing transportation costs. Maybe it's a Zip car fee, maybe it's an Uber, just figuring out how ASSU can somehow talk about reimbursements in that way. And also, like, after getting the time and knowledge and just being with my group, we shared some very vulnerable things. And one thing a person brought up is how they have a mental health advisor, and how they're not the point person to work through your mental health, but they're the person making sure your appointments are aligned, how do you get there, and all those things. And I think implementing that would be so useful. And if elected onto ASSU, thank you so much.
Moving on to the next question, which is safety and activism, or sorry, the next topic I should say. So for campus activism, just like you asked from Ivy Chen, what is the role of student activism on campus? How do you plan to interact with student demonstrators and activism if elected as an ASSU senator? So we'll start with Lizbeth.
Yeah, I ran for this position specifically because student activists aren't being heard on campus. And I think that my role would be specifically to have these conversations with them every day, whenever need be, 24/7, if that's what they're asking for. I think student activists are why there's change in universities worldwide, not just here, not just at Stanford. And I think that they're change. And like what was mentioned before, Stanford should not be afraid of being the one leading this change. And we have to recognize that administration is kind of like old, they're out of the loop. We are the new minds. People always tell us, you're the change makers, but there's no way that we can be change makers if we're not listened to, if we're not put into these positions where we work with administration and try to make it happen.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We'll be moving on to Ethan.
I too, in the same breath as Lizbeth, is the reason why I'm running. I think this is the main thing that kind of got me to this point, because not only is student activism not being taken seriously, they're not being protected. And one of the main things that I really want to push for is protections for our student staff people who want to be part of these mobilization efforts, but are scared because of their affiliation. They are working with the institution, so if we're doing all this work voicing student opinions that are against the institution itself, it's kind of putting job security on the line. And as a first generation low income student, that is a lot, because these funds that we use, it affects our day-to-day life. It affects whether, if the dining halls close, are we gonna go DoorDash something, or we can't because we don't have the money to. So when we really think about student activism, I think it's so important for us not only to hear and to make changes, but also to protect them and our most vulnerable, especially when they're giving back to the communities who need it the most.
Thank you, Ethan. We'll be moving on to Angelina.
Yeah, this is a scary but important topic. I think that the most important thing to keep in mind is that as a student body, we should be united in the recognition that no one should be silenced and everyone should feel safe. I listened to a podcast this morning about the protests going on at Columbia University and how the university president called the New York police on some of the protesters. And thinking about situations like that in which definitely not a reflection of what's happening, or not necessarily the same as what's happening on our campus, but thinking about situations in which students don't feel comfortable and safe expressing their opinions because of other factors going on or the environment that they're in is really concerning. And I think as a student body, a lot of us agree that people should be allowed to say what they think should be said. And just cultivating a space where people can exercise free speech, exercise, the right to talk and have civil and peaceful and safe conversations is really important. And if we're negligent or, absent-minded in making sure that these needs and these rights are being protected, we could fall down a slippery slope really quickly. So just making sure that students have spaces and venues to speak their minds. And ensuring, again, that there aren't these punitive and overly, violent or overly punitive actions taken against students for, expressing their opinions is really important for the ASSU to sustain.
So first of all, I just want to say that anyone who thinks that Stanford, like advocacy and activism, protests at Stanford is something new, do not know this university's history. Like, that is not who Stanford is. Talisman was founded for anti-apartheid protests, the a cappella group. Hammarskjöld, the row house, which I'm going to be RAing at next year, too, was founded in order to organize for anti-apartheid protests. Fun fact, the reason why California has so many schools on the quota system is because the university administrators thought that a quota system model would have more frequent midterms, and so people would have less opportunities to protest the Vietnam War. So, this is not a new thing at Stanford. I think it's part of our spirit and who we are that we support activists. I think that's really important. I think protecting their safety is the most important. I know the university is really concerned about protester safety. I'd like to remind the university that we are a $40 billion university. We can put in the resources to keeping students safe without suppressing their free speech. I think that's the first thing we need to do. We need to do that for most, as my fellow candidates have said, our most vulnerable students, which include international students. There have been unprecedented attacks on international students, their immigration status as to do with activism and engagement with social issues. And I think it's important that the university takes a really firm stance on protecting international students' right to free speech, which in the United States they do have. I think it's absolutely important that we remember that who we are as a school. We are a school of activists. Most of us applied because we're activists, and it's important that at the school we're supported in our mission of activism.
Thank you all. We're moving on to our next question. So, with many people, both on and off of Stanford's campus, expressing discontent with ongoing polarization occurring on college campuses, What role does the ASSU play in ensuring free speech, academic freedom, and political dialogue? Angelina, we'll start with you.
Great question. From the position of ASSU, some of these students on these boards, on these committees, are the most directly interfacing with administration. They get to be, the speaking piece for voicing student opinion to policymakers in the university who might not realize what the general, concerns of the student body are. And just being able to voice those opinions to the university is a really important aspect of the Senate's responsibility, in my opinion. Secondly, again, I think that the Senate has the responsibility to push bills and legislation and different pieces of policy that directly support students who are engaging in maybe short or long-term protesting, recognizing incidents where that's not happening, whether that's been events in recent history or like upcoming events, making sure that if there's a protest being planned, that having conversations with relevant administrative members to make sure that it's happening safely and that no one's getting hurt, and that the university isn't putting undue bars on these protests and these demonstrations. And I guess lastly, just communicating information to the student body about what their rights are and what their potential opportunities are for demonstrating and for exercising their free speech, being that communication line between administration and student body.
Yeah, I also want to second Angelina on that. It is the role of the ASSU to make everyone feel heard and seen on campus, but I also think that it is the role of ASSU to seek out these communities, these ethnicities, these members that feel like they're being marginalized, that they're being attacked. Because if a student doesn't feel safe on campus, why would they seek out the ASSU? I feel like ASSU senators should be the one reaching out to different community members and asking, what do you need from me? What do you need from the university? What do you need me to ask admin? Because it's also a lot of students don't know how the ASSU works. So why would they, on top of having their midterms, on having their homework, having their personal commitments and their extracurriculars, why would they go out and seek all of this when they don't feel safe? So I think that we should take this initiative to seek out these students. And I also think that we should ensure that students are satisfied with anything that comes out of the ASSU and administration. I feel like this whole year, a large part of the student body has felt that everything that has been published has been either half-assed or performative, and that's not okay. That's not what a student population should feel about their university. And so whenever that happens, we need to rethink our strategy and how do we make it better.
Hope. I have to say, so okay, first thing, Fizz, awful place, absolutely awful place. It consumes this campus with negativity, and I think it's important that we recognize the effect that it has on this campus. Because Fizz automatically fills information gaps. Any space that's not taken up by authoritative voices is going to be taken up by Fizz. And Fizz will have you believe that this is a campus where people are tearing each other apart, where people hate each other and are screaming at each other and are tearing each other down. I think it's important that we pull back to what's reality, what we see in front of us. The reality is that for several months before, several things happened, the blue and white tent and the sit-in to stop genocide peacefully cohabited White Plaza. 4 months. 4 months this was able to happen because we're not a school of barbarians, and that's what I think social media and Fizz specifically would have us believe. I think it's most important that Stanford and our leaders, ASSU senators, go into Fizz. Make sure that, I'm a Fizz moderator. I see the ugliest side of that platform. I think it's absolutely important that we take take the space and offer a message of positivity, a message of hope. I think that Stanford can become better. I think that Stanford can be a place where we look out for our fellow person, but we need to believe that we're willing to do that as a campus. And as long as we're nothing but a reflection of our most consistent thoughts. And so I think 100% we need to commission a project in positivity as an undergraduate senate and as student leadership.
Just so I'm answering the question to its full extent, would you mind restating it?
Absolutely. With many people, both in and out of Stanford, expressing discontent with the ongoing polarization on college campuses, what role does the ASSU play in ensuring free speech, academic freedom, and political dialogue?
Perfect. So I just want to pull a couple examples because it's been all over social media, so I'm sure you guys have heard of it. But first off, the USC valedictorian not being able to say their valedictorian speech because of their affiliations with Palestinian organizations and also their vocal concerns about the genocide happening in Palestine. I think that's an extreme violation of expression. And on top of that, even here on our college campuses, all frosh are required to take a college curriculum course, and we all heard about that professor who was doxxed and fired because of their mentioning of the ongoing genocide in Palestine. And I just think it's very shameful that we are in these spaces where we're meant to learn, where we're meant to gain these knowledge from all perspectives, and yet here we are with our college lecturers not being able to express new ideas regarding the things that are happening in global context. And so it's just very sad to see that like these things are happening. And what I think about what ASSU can do, and I think we just need to stop being afraid to be a trailblazer in that sense, and really advocating and pushing for these for student expression, for openness and dialogue in these classes that are meant for that. That's what the college curriculum is meant to do. And I think that's why I think it's one of the most useless curriculums Stanford offers, because it's not targeting what it was meant to target. And so going back to all of what ASSU can do, I think if we are vocal about these concerns and actively making and addressing them is the best way to move forward.
Thank you. All right, so we're now going to move on to our next topic, which is funding and administration. All right. What are the biggest current obstacles to clubs smoothly receiving annual and quick grants, and how do you plan to remedy them? Ethan, we'll start with you.
Can you restate that? Apologies.
What are the biggest current obstacles to clubs smoothly receiving annual and quick grants, and how do you plan to remedy them?
I think as a member of PASU, my big is the financial officer, Kurt, and so I think when discussing these things with them, I think one of the main concerns was what a previous candidate has stated. Just the function of the website grant ed altogether is very outdated, and so when going through that process, I think updating it to where it's easier to input information and easier for us to actually manually do it is a great way to start. And also when we think about grants and applications, and I think we just need to be transparent in what we approve and don't approve, and deadlines. And I think being clear about those, especially to the financial officers, is a great way to combat that.
Yeah, this is also a great question. I have a bit of a unique perspective. I do believe that we need to strive for clarity and communication and education about what the forms are that you have to fill in, like what all the things, the T's you have to cross, and all that you need to do to get these grants. I also think that we need to give clubs more structure and information about how to structure their internal oversight. I think that there's almost no education or instruction on how to do this. Speaking from extensive experience with SSI as the co-president, I think a lot of clubs are in the dark about like what's a financial officer, how do I get one on Cardinal Engage, how do I get these things approved, do I have to put things in Cardinal Engage if I want funding? The policy has changed a lot in the past few years, so there's also like conflicting information online, and you hear different things from different people. Sometimes the process is slow, but at the end of the day, if there's a robust structure internally for having financial officers, training them, passing along information from generation to generation, we would see a lot less of these issues arise with clubs not knowing how to get all these funds and resources that should be theirs to attain and use to like foster their communities. So I really think that if there was some sort of training or some sort of model that clubs could glean and draw from in order to structure their leadership team, to have a more streamlined process where not as much burden is taken on by just a few students, and where students have really clear information laid out for them on how to apply for these grants. Then there would be a lot less heartbreak, a lot less missed deadlines, and the funds would be used a lot more efficiently and succinctly and wisely for the purpose and mission of that organization.
Thank you. Mandla?
Yeah, so I think, absolutely what Angeli said, I think it's absolutely important that we educate club leaders. I know so many clubs which have become demobilized, especially by the pandemic, that discontinuity. It's so hard to build back up again when you don't have a financial officer, when you don't have a president that knows how to organize operations, knows how to budget throughout the year. That can just completely ruin a club where there's a lot of energy behind it. For example, I'm a member of Stanford College Democrats. As you can imagine, most Stanford students are Democrats, and yet this club is on its absolute dying knees because of like wonky years of leadership and transitions that messed up. So I think the first thing is absolutely we need leadership training for VSOs. I think secondly, we can't just give them training. We need continual support in terms of how to do your job, how to access certain streams of funding. Democracy Day is a great example of this. Democracy Day has like a $30,000 annual operating budget, and they end up putting on a $60,000 event. Why? Because they're very good at going across campus and tapping into alternative streams of funding. We need to help our VSOs get really good at that. And I think the Stanford Drag Troupe is a great example of how you're able to leverage neighborhood funding in order to elevate the things that you as a VSO do. And so I think it's important that we as a student leadership give them the resources that they need to be successful and structure themselves, and give them the resources to be more ambitious and not have finances be the primary constraint in terms of there's this great big idea that everyone at Stanford loves, but because we can't fill out a Google form, we can't do it. I think that's ridiculous and a terrible indictment on the state of student extracurricular activities.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as a member of 4 clubs, 2 being co-president and 1 being financial officer, I think, and most of them are ethnic driven or identity driven, so they cater to marginalized communities at Stanford. P cards are inaccessible. For example, I'm a part of FLIP, and we're one of the biggest groups on campus that caters to FLY students. And we don't have a P card this year because of last year's executive decisions, but I don't understand why that fault has to fall on this year's new executive members. And we're FLY students, so all our events that we put up, that has to go out of our credit card. And what happens when the ASSU's advance payments or reimbursements do not process in time, then I get charged, or then my co-presidents get charged, and I can't even imagine how many other students are going through this same position. For example, the fake African wedding just happened, and I heard that all of their exec members, their credit cards are maxed out, and we can't keep doing that to our students. It's not sustainable. So P cards need to be more accessible. I also think that advance payments need to be more accessible, and they should be either provided through direct deposit or pick up. Their automatic option is a mailing, and that can take up to 3 weeks, and advance payment is supposed to be there in a few days, so you don't have to go through these processes of having to put this on your credit card. Thank you.
All right. Angelina, you say you plan to advocate for increased funding. Tell us a little bit more about what that looks like. Would you give less funding to a larger number of clubs, more funding to a smaller number of clubs, or would you attempt to increase the student activities fee in order to provide more funding overall?
Right, that's a good question. I do think that the student activities fee should be advocated for an increase. Generally, I think that there are abundant resources available for students to use, student organizations to use. Sometimes, like we said in the last question, it's difficult to glean how those funds can be accessed. I know some funds go to waste as funds roll over from year to year, so maybe more transparency about how that process works, how reserves work in various organizations. Maybe not necessarily if there's a price tag on the total amount of funding that's available for student organizations, but rather an increase in the utilization of those fees and their accessibility to student groups. I think, echoing again what Lizbeth was saying, sometimes a barrier, I've noticed, also an executive board member in the Society of Women Engineers. A big barrier for us doing anything is, again, not having a P card. People have to front really large sums of money, so that prevents us from spending some of the money that might already be available to student organizations or like applying for grants because people can't front thousands of dollars due to barriers in their home and personal lives. Like fronting that sum of money can be a real barrier and preventative measure from clubs doing what they want to do. Just generally, I think having the right amount of money in the right buckets. There's also a lack of clarity on how the different groups of funds work in ASSU. So just increasing education about that.
Thank you. Okay, Ethan, as a part of your platform, Fly advocacy is very central to a lot of the proposals that you have in your petition. And as it's just mentioned, you both are endorsed by Flip, the group, as Fly-friendly candidates. What sets you apart from other candidates who are running or who are here right now in terms of your support for Fly students?
I think the question is, I don't think I want to frame it in a sense of comparing other Fly students to each other, because I feel like our experiences are unique and I feel like it's not something that we should critique or judge. On my end, I'll speak on my experience. The Fly Center has been the reason why I have flourished the way I have this year as a freshman. I think it has provided me the community, the support, the love, even a job at the during spring quarter. I mean, I think when I think of the main reasons why the main reasons why I work for the center is because it doesn't feel like work. It feels like community care. It feels like I can just come into the space, be my truest, authentic self, and share that space with others. I think when I go into the center for my shift and I sit down and I just look around, I look at the different staff members doing their own thing. I see people taking a nap on the couch because they just had a really long day, or someone who just came in and they just want to talk about their day and maybe some of the challenges they faced, or maybe celebrating the successes, like, you know, they didn't take a nap that day, so they were celebrating like they've been so productive. And I think when I think about the Fly community, it's a identity I hold near and dear to my heart, and it's because it's given me so much that I feel the need and the need to give back, because the way that I have received and the way that I have grown because of them is it's unexplainable, and you can only feel it, and so that's why.
One of our moderators. Lizbeth, you proposed a dedicated space for undocumented students on campus. Can you describe a bit more what you imagine the space looking like and how you would protect undocumented students gathering there from being doxxed or otherwise intimidated?
Yeah, of course. So if you don't know, we barely just got our first staff member that works with undocumented students full-time in August. And I feel like Stanford is at least 12 years behind from other universities that have full spaces, community centers for undocumented students and programs for undocumented students. And I'm glad to tell you that there's already programming for undocumented students in which they attend and they rely on each other, and they already attend these spaces. And I feel like if we continue the way that we're working, it's not unlike, or it's, I don't see why people would go and dox them, because this wasn't an issue before. Why would it become an issue now? But I will say that it's easy for us to know who's in the community. And I would go straight to administration and be like, you need to protect your students, because I'm not gonna let what happened at Harvard or what happened with our, unfortunately, Arab student that got ran over. Like, it isn't okay for us not to protect our community. If people aren't even protecting their dean, like at Harvard, it's just outrageous, and we should protect each other. And whether that means mobilizing or doing petitions or whatever, we will protect each other.
So, Mandla, your platform is incredibly detailed with a long list of policy proposals. As an undergraduate Senate representative, where would you get started, and what do you consider to be the most important elements of your platform?
Housing. I would have to say housing. It's the biggest anxiety every year for so many students, not just undergraduate students, but graduate students. I think it's really important to build a relationship between undergraduate advocacy and graduate advocacy. And This is just an aside. If anyone has questions about the housing system, it's a mess, and it's a mess for an inconceivable reason. Because for 60 years, over several decades, we came up with the draw and we refined the draw and we iterated on it and took student feedback and implemented those. And you can read all about the draw in Stanford magazine. And we blew it up for this unfathomable waste of money that's the neighborhood system. And now we're going back to the draw, but not really the draw, because it's a self-select system and sophomore priority, and no one knows how the system works. The last 3 admit weekends, we've had different signs to describe the neighborhoods all different years. There's no continuity here, and we are at a real moment where we can make changes. I think the most important thing that needs to happen is, first of all, deal with this housing crisis. I think it's unacceptable that juniors, there'll be a number of juniors who'll be waitlisted on housing this coming school year. I also think that we need to improve the quality of dorms. Okay, it's fine for some dorms to be nicer, but the difference between Ing and a lot of other dorms, it's criminal. It's kind of not fair. And so I think it's really important that we improve the quality of housing. We make a better deal for housing, one that supports student leaders. RAs shouldn't not be able to afford housing on their RA paycheck. I think summer housing is really important. It shouldn't eat your entire summer stipend, but I think in general, going after R&D, I think it's a really important thing that we do. One last thing I want to say, Ignite, if you know it, it's a pre-orientation program. It's getting shut down, and the reason it's getting shut down is because they can't afford to pay 3 days of R&D housing. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's insane, and we need to fix that. Housing is a center of a lot of problems at Stanford. I think that's what I want to fix first.
Leaving practical considerations behind for the moment, again, what do you think Stanford is at its best? What could it become someday, even if it isn't there yet? We'll start with Lizbeth.
At its best, Stanford is still just an elite institution. And if you ask a lot of students, especially those of us that come from marginalized low-income backgrounds, Stanford is not what you think it is. That's why I feel like there needs to be more people like us in ASSU advocating for each other, because one day Stanford will actually be what it is in these pictures, in these newspapers, in these flyers that it sends out to people. And I just hope that the future is much, much better than what it is today, because if you can't even protect your own 18 students from being cited for protesting, how can you protect anyone else?
Next, Ethan.
I think for this question, I'm just referring back to a previous remark I made about community. And I think the fact that I had to go find community myself is the big problem here. When you first get onto Stanford's campus, you think, oh, everyone loves each other. They say you belong here all throughout NSO, and you're just kind of like, okay, but where? And so the fact that I kind of have to go out of my way on top of my workload, on top of the other things I have to do, I have to go out my way to find community is kind of crazy, because you cannot just come to Stanford and just exist and find your community. You actively have to take the initiative, take all that extra energy to go find that. And for me, Stanford at its best is where I can walk on campus and be like, oh, okay, I'm feeling it. Because at first, the first 2 weeks, I did not feel Stanford. There's some parts of Stanford I still don't mess with today. And so when we think about what in the grand scheme of things, what is Stanford at its best? It's a community, it's a space where anyone can just come on and not have to put that extra energy in finding that space for them.
Next, Angelina.
From the moment I stepped on campus, Stanford struck me as this place where a lot of people think anything is possible. The more I've been on campus, I've noticed that there's disconnects between different communities. There's disconnects between faculty and students in some ways, which really grates on, I think, the public student consciousness. But at its heart, I love the energy of possibility and how people support what they believe in. They stick up for what they believe in, and they try to do actions based on that. Like any group of people, there are moments where I think I've noticed people succumb to various temptations or even their own fears about the way that things could go, and do things that are biased by those fears. But I really believe in the people that make up the Stanford community, and the reason that I'm running is because of the people that I care about and how I think policy decisions and executive decisions impact their day-to-day life, and how we as students can make a step, even if we're not like politicians by nature, how we can stand up for what we think should be done. And that energy of like anyone can step up to the plate, anyone can do anything, whether it's, you know, go start some wacky startup or like speak up in your dorm, you know, town, or house meeting, sorry. I think that we need to foster that energy and that spirit, and that's something that I think differentiates Stanford from other places. It is, you know, a beautiful, expansive campus, and, you know, there are a lot of, you know, things going on and resources, but at its heart, the people are what make this community wonderful and why we can do more than we thought was possible when we even came.
Us, I think. Ethan, I'm so glad you brought up the "you belong" rhetoric. I genuinely think it's the stupidest thing this university's ever come up with. Because, okay, so like, I had a lot of friends who got rejected from Stanford. So many friends, like so many smart, talented, hardworking, driven people who just didn't get admitted to Stanford for whatever reason. And it's fine, whatever. They've made their peace with it. I've made my peace with that. But like, coming here and being told, "Oh, you belong, you're the special one." There's no way I could ever believe that. And I don't think you can. I think you have to be pathologically self-important to believe that. And so, like, all throughout my freshman year, I was trying to figure out how to square that circle. Like, how am I supposed to, like, act like I belong here when there are so many intelligent, amazing people who could be here and who aren't? And eventually I came to, like, the Spider-Man model. So, like, Peter Parker, when he got bitten by a radioactive spider, there was nothing he did to deserve superpowers. Absolutely nothing. There's nothing that any of us did to deserve this amazing opportunities and resources, but it doesn't matter because you have it. You're in now. And what do you do with that? And when Peter Parker got bitten by a radioactive spider, he built a spider suit. So I think it's really important that, you know, metaphorically, we build our spider suits. We try to figure out what to do with that spider bite. I think that's what Stanford is. I think it's about figuring out how to use these resources, which you don't deserve, to make something incredible for other people.
Thank you all for your responses. We'll be ending off now with our concluding remarks. So just a reminder, you each have 2 minutes to make a closing statement, just basically talking about why you are the best candidate on the stage to be an undergraduate senator. So we'll start with Ethan.
So 15 senators get elected, and within those 15, I believe I could be one of them, because I focus on the collective. I think in order to make real actionable change, it doesn't take one, it takes all. When it takes a resolution, it takes a majority to pass, it takes the collective. So when we talk about those things, I want you guys to keep in mind that I will be keeping in mind the power of my own vote, but also just the power of ensuring that the rest of my peers, rest of my colleagues, we're all focused on one vision, which is you guys. And for me, I'm here to say that I am pro boycott, divestment, sanctions. I'm fly friendly, and I'm willing to just add to the student experience any way I can. There's many reasons why I'm running, but the main one is to really revamp Senate structure. And I just believe that all the things that we've been talking about is because of the lack of action in the Senate. And I think when we think about the Senate, it's because of the structures put in place. I've had talks with several ASSU senators that say it's sometimes not the senator's fault, it's the structure itself. And so really taking a deep dive on what that means and what that looks like on a broader scope of things is one of the main reasons why I'm running, is one of the main reasons why I'm running. So I'm looking forward to learning, growing, and disrupting this space with you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ethan. We'll move on to Mandla.
I want to talk. I want to talk to people. I try to tap in. So freshman year I didn't do anything. I was kind of a loser. No, that's fine. You can do nothing at Stanford and still be awesome. But I think that last quarter I started getting really involved with theater. The theater scene at Stanford is extremely vibrant. I think it's so important that we hear their issues. I learned a lot. I think that's the reason I'm running for undergraduate senate, because of all the problems that I heard with being able to run a successful VSO. This quarter I rushed Delta Kappa Epsilon, the public service-oriented unhoused fraternity at Stanford, because I want to know the issues that affect Greek life at Stanford. I think it's really important that we understand where they are, how to elevate them to be the best that they can be for the student body at large. I coordinate Admin Weekend right now, because I think that gives me a vision of Stanford as a magical kingdom. You know, when you come here, you're wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you believe that anything is possible here. I think that those admits know Stanford better than we do. I think that we can make it magical, and that's why I try to tap into those vibes. And so I think in general, I try to talk to people, and I want to be able to communicate. I know that it's honestly, I know I brought it up before, this is kicking our ass. And I think that the ASSU right now is amazing. I think there's so many hardworking people. Ivy's incredible. Vote for Ivy before me. But I think that right now, no one knows what's going on, and I really want to be able to talk to people and let them know what the ASSU is doing. When the dining hall plates are shrunk, you shouldn't feel gaslit by R&D, like, well, this has always been the case. You should know that your ASSU is working on, and that's what I want to try to do. I want to try to leverage the relationships that I've built in different departments of Stanford to be able to do that. And I want to listen to people, like the incredible people that are on stage with me right now, and I really hope that I can make that happen as your senator.
Yeah, so next year I'm going to be a senior, so it's really easy for me to not give a fuck in simpler terms. But I'm running now because I'm not doing this for a resume. I'm not doing this because I want to look good. I'm doing this because this year has been full of issues, and because my community and all the communities that I'm part of need this. Because I have people relying on me, and because I'm part of a greater community, and the ASSU, Stanford, it's nothing without its students. And so I'm here to represent those students that have felt left out, that have felt like they were silenced, that have felt that Stanford is not for them. And because change needs to happen, and this isn't about me. Like you just said, you can vote for literally anyone, but I'm going to be committed to my cause. I'm going to be committed to my people, and that's what matters the most.
So the reason that I'm here is because I firmly believe in a Senate which represents, all students as much as humanly possible, and supports legislation that supports not only us but future generations to do the things that they feel are important and to accomplish and utilize resources. I'm sick of, again, I've been here for many years now, and I'm sick of hearing my peers complain about how bureaucracy and legislation doesn't support them, and it just, marginalizes certain groups or doesn't serve the needs of students. I come from a background which I think is different than a lot of other candidates. I come from a background of seeing, my friends build a motorized couch out of the lobby of Toyon, like with full machine equipment, because there's not a space for them on campus that can support that. There's ASSU or admin hasn't been able to give them a workspace to put their project, or like building rockets in the basement of a old particle accelerator, or my friends doing crazy stuff and having more ideas for more crazy things and more ideas that they want to see to fruition, whether that's hardware ideas or social ideas, and not being able to actualize these things that they're crazy passionate about and crazy interested in, because maybe not because there aren't the resources, but because there isn't information, there's not education, there's not support from admin all the time. And so by being here, I just want to fill this gap where I feel like I come from engineering and making and artistic communities on campus where there is not as much representation maybe in the government. And I want to be a voice, especially for those communities, because these are people that I care about, and I'm sick of seeing maybe safety or logistical issues arise just because there's not someone there speaking for them. And then again, there are so many issues on campus that are solvable if we just talked about them and put in a little bit of work to resolve them. Like, there's so much here for us, and we just have to seize the day, as the annoying quote goes, and make it happen. So
thank you all so very, very much. That concludes our 2024 ASSU Undergraduate Senate debate. Appreciation to everyone. When we started.
Oh, is it not live?
Yeah, we'll cut off the live stream right now. Behave.
Bye, y'all.
Let me break out the antics yet.
Vote midnight.
Vote.
Vote yes. Okay.